Rich people and poor people alike have trouble letting go of things because they both struggle with letting go of the story associated with their stuff.
You're listening to the Minimalist Podcast with Joshua Fields Milburn and TK Coleman.
Thank you, Malabama. Hello, everybody. Coming up today on this free public minimal episode, a caller has a question about wanting to throw everything away after her home was infested. And another listener has a question about the hypocrisy or the irony of minimalism. Then we've got our lightning round segment, a FAM's question, and a listener tip for you. You can check out the full 2-hour Maximal edition of episode 432, where we answer 5 times the questions and we dive deep into several simple living segments. That private podcast episode is out right now at patreon.com/theminimalists. Your support keeps our podcast 100% advertisement free because, say it with me, y'all, advertisements suck. Let's start with our callers. If you got a question or a comment for our show, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call, 406-219-7839, or you can just email a voice recording straight from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. Our first question today is from MJ.
Hi there, my name is MJ and I'm calling from South Florida. I have a dilemma. A couple of years ago, I found out the apartment I was living in had bed bugs. I had to get rid of a lot of my stuff like furniture, electronics, and anything where bugs could potentially hide. The stuff I did decide to keep, I put it in a storage unit. For example, clothes, kitchen stuff, books, etc. The thing is, my son also put all his music equipment in this storage. I'm talking about guitars, speakers, and even a Mac desktop computer. We are now in a new apartment, and even though it should be safe to take things out of storage, it's been a little over 2 years since I put everything there. I'm still not over the trauma of having to deal with those nasty bugs. If it were up to me, honestly, I would throw everything away or donate it. But my son wants his musical equipment and computer back, but I'm also still scared there might still be bugs in them, and I don't want to bring that into my new home. Needless to say, I don't want to keep paying $100-ish a month for a storage unit full of stuff I don't use or need. But I also don't want to get rid of my son's stuff. Or better said, he doesn't want to let it go because he spent a lot of money on it and he could actually still use it. He did buy new guitars and equipment after we put everything in storage, and he uses it every day, but he still wants his other stuff back. Help. Any advice?
Man, this is a difficult one because quite often we have people we meet at any of our live events or the people who write in or call in to the show, and they'll say, I lost everything in a fire, in a flood, in some sort of natural disaster. And at first it was terrifying. It was upsetting. But after I got over that initial terror and that upset, it was freeing. And I think that's where MJ is right now for herself. She says, I've got these things in these storage lockers, which, by the way, you've had it in the storage locker for 2 years. You've probably spent roughly $2,500 on storing those things that are still causing some bit of trauma in your life. Now, I don't know whether or not they're still infested with bugs. We can talk a bit about that. But I'm reminded of a story, TK, that a friend of mine told me. They had a really bad black mold infestation in their home. So bad that his wife was really, really sick and she thought she was dying. And when they finally figured out that it was black mold because it was behind the walls, there was no initial sign that there might be this invisible clutter in their home. They were told that they needed to not just leave the house, but they had to leave everything behind. In fact, they had a friend who had to show up, and in their backyard, they changed out of the clothes that they had and had to put on these new clothes their friend bought for them. So literally everything, their photographs, their pictures, their guitars, their equipment, their stereo, their television, their couch, their bed sheets, every item they owned tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of items in that home was no longer theirs, because the type of mold that they had, it turns out they were never going to be able to remediate it from all of their possessions. And so they were forced in that moment to let go. And you know what he told me? It was one of the most devastating things I've ever gone through. But when I got to the other side of it, it was one of the most freeing things. And there were a couple reasons for that. One is there were a lot of things there I knew I wanted to get rid of anyway. That tends to be the case. But two, it strengthened this letting go muscle in a way that was a bit damaging at first. In fact, that's what happens when you go to the gym. You want to damage your muscles in order for them to grow. And he and his wife grew in these profound ways. By the way, they had a couple kids as well. So everything that their kids had to leave behind, they also were dealing with this letting go. And it was a lot of letting go at once. And sometimes that can break someone. And I think it broke them. But out of the ashes, when they rose, they realized that, oh, I can let go of anything.
Yeah, man. Letting go is interesting because when other people are involved, you have to deal with that dilemma of letting go for yourself versus letting go for or on behalf of others. You and I just had a conversation with someone at our live show in Orange County where he says, man, I love what you guys are doing. I've been letting go. But just recently I had a run-in with my mom who hangs on to all of these things and she's such a hoarder. And so I threw out a bunch of stuff for her and she was really upset at me. And we talked about that. And part of what you said to him is you can only let go for yourself. You can't let go on behalf of other people. If they're not ready, you've got to let them take the journey at a pace that's right for them. And so part of the struggle here is what do we do when we feel like we can find the strength to let go, but we're hooked up to someone in a certain sort of way. We love them. We have a relationship with them. We care about them and they're not ready to let go. And we're affected by their decision to not let go. That's a really tough thing. And you don't want a situation where you're like the people in the horror movies who leave a house to escape a ghost. And then you set up in a new house, in a new neighborhood. And it's like you're still haunted by the same ghost. The ghost followed you. And this is the kind of ghost that you don't want following you. So I think about something that one of our previous guests, Ray, said on the show, Ray Fleming. He said, if you have a problem that money can solve, you don't have a problem. And that's still one that's, I'm still chewing on that, right? But recommending that people solve problems with money is such a delicate issue because everyone's money situation is different that I think we have in some ways cowered away from the ability to think practically about the kinds of problems that money can solve. And I think this might be one of them. So you're ready to let go of your stuff. Your son still finds that computer to be useful. I don't want to just say flippantly, why don't you buy him a new computer? But I have a very important economic compare to what here, which is you are spending money every month that you say you don't want to spend in order to hold on to a computer and a bunch of other stuff that you don't want to use. What if instead of paying that money for storage, you invested that money towards replacing that computer? He gets to have what he wants. You get to have what you want at the same cost of what you're already paying. And then both parties win. I know how you parcel out those costs and how you make the payments has some variables there, but you talked about as a possibility selling the things that are in storage. Like, I just want to give away things. I just want to sell things. What if you sold off the stuff and stopped paying those bills and just bought him a new computer? A second possibility is to just sit down and discuss with him and to enlist him in the process of thinking it through with you and say, hey, look, I want you to have the tools that you need to succeed. I want you to be able to have a computer, but I'm just so afraid that if we bring it back home, it's going to create a problem. Can we reach a compromise? Can we both chip in? Can we find a way to finance a purchase of that so we're both happy?
I think one could also argue that maybe the cost will be appreciably less by letting go. Maybe not just the monetary cost. Maybe it's even going to cost you more money to replace a few of these things. And you identify the 3 or the 5 things that are essential and that you'd like to replace. And that might cost you more money than the storage. Of course, on a long enough timeline, it's going to cost you way less. If you kept these things in storage for 50 years, we know that that's going to just be a tremendous amount of money wasted. But it's going to cost you less in terms of stress and anxiety and trauma that is associated with holding on to these things. We know that letting go is the cost we pay for peace of mind. And I think about these things that are in the storage locker. Of course, you can consult an expert. You can bring an expert out and say, hey, do we still have some sort of infestation in these items? It might be worth paying someone for an hour or 2 of their time, not to mitigate the infestation if it's still there, but to assess whether or not it's safe to bring some of those things into your home. That could give you that peace of mind. But what if the stuff was radioactive and you just knew you couldn't take it out of there at all? You'd be forced to let go, just like my friend was with the mold situation. They knew that was making them sick. And you know that you don't want these bugs to come back in your place. So it might make sense, like my friend did when he brought in the mold specialist to do the mold testing and eventually some remediation if it was necessary. But then he realized, I can't do that remediation on these things. I have to let them go. Sometimes we're forced to let go of something, even though we didn't want to. And you can keep clinging to it. If your house just went up in flames today, and yeah, you're going to let go of the things physically, but you may not have let go of those things mentally. And they're creating all this mental and emotional and spiritual clutter, this internal clutter, even though the physical thing itself is gone. MJ, I'd love to send you a copy of our book, Everything That Remains, because that is really the story of letting go of everything. In a way, I was forced to let go of a few things. When my mom died, my marriage ended, my career ended. Forced to let go of those things. Some of those things I let go of on my own. Other things I was dragged, kicking and screaming, into letting go. And that made me realize that it was possible to let go of many of the other things, the material possessions in my life. By the way, we're doing the 10th anniversary tour for this book right now. TK, you already talked about, we did that first tour stop in Orange County last month. And oh, what a magical event at Arvida Book Co. in Orange County. In fact, it was such an event that we outgrew the space, and they found us this beautiful lodge across the street. And when they found us that lodge, we outgrew that space. There was a line around the block, and we were able to figure it out. We did a double header that night, not something we anticipated. Shout out to everyone who attended and gave us grace and understanding that we couldn't get everyone into this lodge space because of the hundreds of people that were there. And so I had to let go even then of my idea of the perfection of this event. I wanted to go perfect. And yet it was a magical evening, not despite the flaws, but including the flaws of the evening. And so we'd love to see you on tour if you want to come on out, MJ. We'd be happy to see you in Palm Springs. That's this weekend. Or we've got 6 other cities all across California. theminimalists.com/tour. We're going to send you a copy of Everything That Remains. If you want the book or the ebook version, we'll send those to you. Or if you like our podcast, you'll enjoy the audio book version of Everything That Remains. It's still my favorite book that we have written. Let's move on to some social media questions. Alabama, what do you got for us?
We have a question here from Salvador on Facebook. How is it minimalist to encourage people to download 7 different wallpapers?
TK Coleman exposed. You hypocrite.
What did I do? Like, is there an AI wallpaper video of me out there? Like, here's why you need to download 7 wallpapers. What's the context for this? I'm curious.
So on Facebook or elsewhere, Professor Sean occasionally will post some of the free resources we have out there. And one of those is this beautiful art project we did with Dave over at Spire Media, where we found ways to declutter your smartphone and your computer, at least the desktop of it, to make it a bit more beautiful, a bit more simple. And so we created these 7 different wallpapers. One of them just says less is now as a reminder. Another one of them is the 6 questions or 5 questions to ask before buying something, which is a really useful wallpaper. If you're standing at the grocery store and you're like, okay, I'm thinking about buying these 3 things, or you're at your desktop computer and you're getting on Amazon, boom, here are 5 questions to ask really quickly to determine whether or not this is the best use of this money for this purchase. Does it make sense to make this purchase right now? Here are some easy questions for you. And so we have these 7 beautiful, elegant wallpapers, and I'll address this question head on. I know they're probably being a little bit snarky here, but I'll pretend they're sincere for a moment. And I'll just say this. Would it be more minimalist for us to have 7 different downloads, that to force people to go through 7 different steps to download these 7 wallpapers? Now, the intent behind this was, hey, you download all 7. It's one quick file. You pick whichever one you want. Or if you want 2 or 3 of them and you want to rotate your different wallpapers out, great. And you just delete the rest. You let those go, and then you hold on to the ones that you get value from. And then, of course, if you stop getting value from any of those wallpapers, I wouldn't want you to hold on to those either. We created these as a free resource for people who are struggling with the digital clutter of their devices, whether it's their computer or their phone. And so we've got all these free resources on our website, theminimalists.com/resources. You can find all of the free resources there, including these 7 different wallpapers. With that context, what thoughts do you have, TK?
Yeah, I think anytime we're discussing minimalism or any other ism or a product, a good set of questions to ask is, for whom is it for? For whom is it not for? Good salesmanship is when you can make a product or service available and you present it as an option for those who need it, and you're willing to say, this is probably not for you if you encounter someone that doesn't require that. Bad salesmanship is when you twist people's arm and you try to manipulate them into thinking poorly about themselves or their life if they don't buy your product, regardless of the need. And I think it's very important, whether we're thinking about ideas or products or services, that we always ask ourselves, hey, who would be the kind of person who doesn't need this, and be able to answer that? Who would be the kind of person who does need this, and answer that? And so when it comes to minimalism, for any lifestyle, for any number of books you own, for any number of t-shirts you own, for any number of downloadable wallpapers you have on your computer, it's good to ask, all right, who would benefit from that? Who would probably experience something like that as clutter? And then just acknowledge that both groups exist and be at peace with that, you know? And so I would reword the question into, instead of saying, how is it minimalist to encourage people to download 7 different wallpapers? I would say, when is it minimalist to encourage people to do that? When is it not minimalist to encourage people to do that? It's minimalist to encourage people to do that when you can say, hey, here's something that has benefited us in this particular way. We think it's cool for these reasons. And if you agree with that, you might find value in this resource. And if not, no problem. You can ignore it. When is it not minimalist to do it? When you put something out there like that and you say, you cannot be a good minimalist unless you have the t-shirt and the coffee cup and the minimalist calendar, and you also download these 7 wallpapers. If you don't do those things, you're not on the team. But for $9.95 or whatever it may be, you can be on the team. You're doing that, I think you're a hypocrite.
Yeah, well, you know what's funny about this is I think this question asker was trying to point out some sort of hypocrisy with, oh, look, how could this possibly be minimalist? And like, it was, oh, gotcha, right? It's like when I'm walking through the airport and I have my carry-on bag with me, inevitably people walk up to me and they're like, wait, I thought you were a minimalist. You have a bag full of stuff with you? And like, it's almost like they thought they got me there. And it's like, well, yeah, of course I have a bag full of stuff. I'm traveling right now, right? And when you call yourself a minimalist, now everything you do is instantly blanketed by irony, right? And I get that it's ironic that a minimalist might need some things if your view of minimalism is that you should live in a total state of scarcity. But as you say, it's the first line in your ebook, which is called Emotional Clutter. You said that minimalism isn't scarcity. It's abundance healthfully expressed. And that means I don't have a bunch of excess stuff. And even if you're downloading 7 wallpapers, if you're going to use all 7, great. But our intention is not that. It's you download them and hold on to the ones that you get value from. And please, please let go of the rest. And don't download them at all if you don't feel like you would get value from them. It's a free resource. And you have the opportunity to declutter your phone if you wish. And if not, that's totally fine too.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you why I like these types of questions or remarks. Maybe there is an edge of the gotcha, caught you in a contradiction element to it. But I also think that every well-developed perspective has been refined by the purifying powers of criticism, calling out, or even people just looking for the error, trying to find something wrong. If you have an idea that you think is worth something, you want a few of those people in your life. You want the people that are going to look for the loopholes, look for the contradictions. And yeah, that can feel irritating depending on the kind of mood that you're in, but you always come out with a more nuanced perspective when you spend at least a little bit of time engaging it. Is it possible to go too far so that you become obsessed with everyone agreeing with you and so on? Yes, it's possible, but I like to engage ideas like this every once in a while because it helps keep my thinking fresh, because there is a real existing superficial understanding of minimalism that this would be a good critique of. And to be aware of that allows you to present your ideas in a way that differentiates it from that. Because when you're talking to people about minimalism, it's not always clear to the people that you're talking to that what you're saying is different from those superficial aspects. Once you become aware of it, you can differentiate for them.
Malabama, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It's time for the lightning round, where we answer your questions from TikTok.
Yes, indeed. You can follow The Minimalist on all the socials, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and X and Threads. We are at The Minimalists on all of those platforms. Now, during the lightning round, we each have 60 seconds, TK, 60 seconds to answer your question with a short...
The look he gave at 60 seconds. Oh, I'm dead.
My brilliance can't be contained with a shot clock.
You know, I don't like to quantify my inspirations in terms of time and other arbitrary metrics.
All right. Anyway, we try to do it in less than 140 characters so you can share our pithy answers on social media if you like. We call them minimal maxims. You can find all of our minimal maxims over at minimalmaxims.com. And you can find all of this week's minimal maxims in the show notes over at theminimalists.com/podcast. And by the way, we'll deliver those minimal maxims to your inbox every Monday. If you sign up for our email list, we'll send you the show notes as well for free. No junk, no spam. No advertisements, just starting your week off with a bit of simplicity. You can just head on over to theminimalists.email if you'd like to subscribe to our email list. Join hundreds of thousands of other people who are on that email list who get the show notes every week along with these minimal maxims. Anne has a question for us.
What do you do when you have a hard time letting go of clutter because you grew up poor?
TK, you got some pithy for us?
I would say clutter is an opportunity for generosity. Anytime you have an excess of material goods, that becomes a potential bridge across which you can transport wealth to others. So the distinction between abundance and wealth, again, abundance is a surplus of resources. Wealth is the transformation of abundance into value through the application of creative effort. So if you got a lot of stuff that you don't need, you don't want, and you're clinging to it because back in the past, you used to be poor, but you're poor no more, you can use that connection you have to your past as a basis for empathy. And you can look at all of the people who are still in need and you can say, all right, I get it. If I let it go, I let the energy flow because I'm putting that abundance into circulation so that it becomes wealth for someone else. Don't deny your story, but use that story, leverage that story to connect with people who are still living in what used to be your past so that they too can have a future like you.
I love that. And I think it dovetails perfectly into what I'm going to say. I got a little pithy answer for you here. Rich people and poor people alike have trouble letting go of things because they both struggle with letting go of the story associated with their stuff. Early on, when I was young, my mom told me there's a big difference between being poor and being broke. She said, we're broke. We don't have any money, but we're not poor. Poverty is a mindset. We didn't have a whole lot of things growing up, although we did have an abundance of love, abundance of care, and an abundance of freedom in a way that money couldn't buy. And as I, throughout my 20s, started climbing the corporate ladder, I actually gave up some of that abundance. And even though I made good money in the corporate world, I had a poverty mindset. That poverty mindset was, I'm going to spend more money than I make. I'm going to make other people like me based on what I purchase and what I spend. And so, in a way, I had to let go of my poverty mindset. And the weird thing is that happened to me when I left the corporate world. And I took a 90% pay cut. And I became poor for the first time in my adult life. I'd experienced it as a kid, so I knew I could get through it. But I also knew that I needed to let go of the desire to please other people through my purchases. And so I think that's where Anne is right now. She has a hard time letting go of clutter because she grew up poor and she's attached to, well, maybe I'm going to need those things someday, right? Even though you may not be poor right now, you're holding on to the way things used to be. All right, real quick for right here, right now. In fact, we got another question here we'll answer in a moment. But here's one thing that's going on in the life of the minimalist. A brand new month is here, and it is the perfect time to declutter with the 30-day minimalism game. You can download the free calendar at theminimalists.com/game. You can see how to play that game. I'll give you a quick overview. You partner up with someone, a friend, a family member, someone else in your house that's really easy to partner up with, and you bet something. It could be a really nice meal. It can be $1 million if you have that abundance mindset, TK. Go into debt playing the minimalism game. Whatever you decide to bet, though, here's how you win the minimalism game. First day of the month, you get rid of one item. Second day of the month, 2 items. Third day of the month, 3 items, so forth and so on. Starts off really easy to give you that momentum you need. By the end of the month, you've gotten rid of 500 items. Well, whoever makes it to the end of the month wins. If you both make it to the end of the month, then you've both won because you've gotten rid of a bunch of stuff. I'd like you to play it a little bit different this time. You can share your photos online, by the way, using the hashtag over there at theminimalists.com/game. And I'd love for you to get rid of one of your favorite things on day one. Try that out. This is an exercise that is more difficult for most people. It's easy to find one thing to get rid of. And that's really the point of the minimalism game. Get rid of one thing. It's easy to get that momentum. But what's one of your favorite things? Are you willing to let go of one of your favorite things? Because if you can do that on day one, day two is going to seem so much easier for you. Let us know when you share online. You can take pictures of all the stuff and you can see tens of thousands of other people who have played the 30-day minimalism game. Let's move on over to a FAMS question from Alabama. This is from our most recent Zoom call with our patrons. Sarah has a question for us.
I'm trying to let go of relationships that are keeping me from connecting with new people and wonder if this is me trying to protect myself from future drama. Do you have any suggestions for interrogating whether you've minimized the right relationships?
Well, letting go of toxic relationships makes space for solitude. Now, you get to choose whether or not you want to fill that solitude with more relationships, or maybe it's just the relationship with myself. One of the reasons a toxic relationship becomes toxic is because of me. It's us mixing the two of us together, right? And so that could be a toxic friendship, toxic coworker, toxic intimate relationship. And so once you've gotten that relationship out of your life, the question isn't, who do I now fill this void with? It reminds me of the episode we did a few weeks ago, TK, about filling empty rooms. We often feel compelled to fill empty spaces, but maybe you've just made some space for some solitude. What do you think?
This reminds me of a conversation I had with my mentor, Vaughn Washington, many years ago, where I was presenting a couple of options to him. And I said, I want to do this, but I think I'm just doing this to be comfortable. And he said, don't despise your comforts now. Life is more than comfort, but it is also true that you want to carve out spaces where you do feel comfortable. And what I say to this question is, don't despise your need to reduce drama. Any kind of relationship you have will carry its share of drama, but you also want to carve out spaces where the drama that you deal with is meaningful drama. It's contextualized by shared values and a higher purpose that makes the drama worth it. And if you've got relationships that are not amplified by bringing in other people, if you've got relationships that work against you meeting new people and making new friends, then that might be a sign of a red flag. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Four Loves, he describes friendship as the least jealous of loves, because friendly love is that kind of love which becomes enhanced by the addition of other people and other parties. And so I think if you're dealing with friends here, and these are true friends, then their friendship with you should be enhanced by you wanting to engage other people. And so I would take a look at those relationships and say, why am I binding myself to these people? Is it because we're in fifth grade together and I feel guilty? I'm telling myself some story that this would be bad of me to branch out. Also, you don't have to look at these relationships as ones you need to formally break up from in order to branch out from. You can branch out without breaking up. You can open yourself to new things without renouncing the things of old. Just start introducing some new habits, some new boundaries, and challenge them to demonstrate that they have the capacity to be open.
Sarah, thank you for your question. You can join us for the first Friday of every month, Friday afternoon, Minimalist Zoom, patreon.com/theminimalists. 100 or a few hundred of you join us at a time. We all turn our cameras on. You can hop up there and ask some questions with us, or you can just turn your camera off, your mic off, and you can be a fly on the wall during that Zoom call. It's sort of this beautiful liminal space between the podcast and our live events, because we get to interact with you face to face, albeit through screens. And it's a great way to get to know you as part of our audience. Patreon.com/theminimalists. We got a bunch more to talk about, but first, Alabama, what do you got for us?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hello, minimalists and team. My name is Julie, and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I found it interesting on your New Year's podcast episode, One Day, or Day One, how day one was a desired day. The first step toward living a better life, however that may look. It struck me because in the 12-step world, one day is a desired day, just any other day, living a life in recovery from whatever one may be in recovery for. In that world, day one means starting over again, often not for the first time. I just found it interesting how these few words can have such a different meaning depending on the lens you view them through. I enjoy listening to you all very much.
All right, y'all. We'll see you on Patreon for the full 2-hour Maximal edition of episode 432, which includes answers to 1 million more questions, plus several simple living segments, including a beautiful minimalist home tour from one of our listeners. Check that out at the Minimalist Private Podcast, patreon.com/theminimalist, or click the link down in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly Maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You'll also gain access to all of our podcast archives all the way back to episode 001. By the way, Patreon is now offering free trials. So if you'd like to test drive our private podcast, you can join for 7 days for free. And if you're still on the fence, here's a testimonial from one of our lovely Patreon subscribers. Becky says, I look forward to the private podcast every week. Each topic is something I find value in exploring in depth. The expanded discussions on Patreon help me immensely with my minimalist goals. I love it, she says. Well, thank you, Becky. And that is our minimal episode for today. If you leave here with just one message, let it be this. Love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.